No one in courtroom 7 breathed when she laughed at Judge Fleischer. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It wasn't confusion. It was the sharp, polished, contemptuous laugh of someone who had never once been told no and believed with chilling certainty that the law was just another door her father's money could open. The bailiff had barely finished asking everyone to rise when she rolled her eyes, stayed seated in her cream designer suit, crossed one stiletto over the other, and muttered loud enough for half the room to hear, "This circus actually expects me to be scared?" In that instant, beneath the cold white lights and the stare of 12 silent strangers, everyone felt it. Something was about to happen in that courtroom that no one would ever forget. At first, it looked like a simple hit-and-run hearing, the kind privileged people assume can be cleaned up with a check, a family attorney, and enough arrogance to suffocate the truth. But the woman at the center of it, 26-year-old Vanessa Sterling, daughter of tech billionaire Damian Sterling, had made one fatal mistake before the hearing had even begun. She had mistaken Judge Eleanor Fleischer's silence for weakness. If you've ever seen someone so rich they thought consequences were for other people, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Because what happened next is the kind of justice people remember for years. And if stories like this restore even a little faith in the world, don't forget to like and subscribe before the gavel falls. Across the aisle sat the victim, a hospital janitor named Elena Morales, wearing a plain navy dress that had been pressed with painful care. Her left wrist still trembled faintly when she moved it. A thin scar traced the edge of her temple, disappearing into dark hair pinned neatly behind one ear. She sat with a kind of exhausted dignity that made the room protect her without saying a word. She wasn't there for spectacle. She was there because 6 months earlier, on a rain-soaked Thursday before dawn, a black imported coupe had jumped the curb outside St. Vincent's, clipped her hard enough to throw her into a concrete planter, and then sped away while she lay in the street bleeding, clutching a lunch bag with her daughter's name written on it in marker. Vanessa's attorney, sleek and silver-haired, tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. Visibility was poor. The driver panicked. There was no certainty Vanessa had been behind the wheel. Elena, he implied gently, was emotional, confused. Judge Fleischer listened without moving. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair swept into a low knot, and eyes so still they seemed to make liars hear themselves more clearly. She never interrupted for drama. She only interrupted when she smelled rot. Vanessa finally stood when instructed, though it looked less like obedience and more like insult arranged into posture. She tilted her chin, glanced at Elena, then at the judge, and said, "With respect, Your Honor, this woman is trying to turn an accident into a lottery ticket." The courtroom went silent, not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that lands like a blow. Elena's mouth parted, but she didn't speak. A man in the back whispered, "Jesus." Even the court reporter paused half a second before continuing. Judge Fleischer folded her hands once and said, in a voice almost too calm to measure, "Miss Sterling, every time you speak, you reveal more than your attorneys can conceal." That's when everything changed, because what had started as a cold dispute over reckless driving became something far darker when the prosecution requested permission to introduce newly authenticated evidence. Vanessa smirked. Her father, seated behind her in a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than Elena made in a year, leaned back with bored confidence. Then the screen flickered on. First came CCTV footage from the hospital loading entrance. Grainy, rain streaking the lens, headlights cutting through the dark, Elena stepping carefully off the curb with a mop bucket in one hand. Then the black coupe lunged too fast around the corner, tires skidding, bumper striking her body with sickening force. Gasps rippled through the room. Elena crumpled. The car stopped for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds. Long enough to get out. Long enough to help. Long enough to choose humanity. Instead, the driver's door opened a crack, and a woman's voice snapped from inside the vehicle. "Get back in. Just drive." A murmur swept the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. Vanessa's expression twitched, just once. Her attorney rose immediately, objecting to audio quality, chain of custody, relevance. Judge Fleischer overruled him in 2 words. Then came the valet records from an exclusive rooftop club downtown, time-stamped 48 minutes before impact. Vanessa had claimed she'd been home all night, but the record showed her car leaving at 3:12 a.m. Then a bartender testified that Vanessa had boasted about being too rich for breathalyzers. After downing champagne, she'd waved away from her tab with a laugh. Then a private security guard from her father's building testified that when the damaged car returned, Vanessa ordered the garage camera feed erased. By now, her confidence had begun to crack, but arrogance still clung to her like perfume. She leaned toward the microphone and said too sharply, "Do you know who my father is? This case is a media tantrum. That woman should be grateful she got a settlement offer at all." The courtroom went dead silent again. Even her own attorney closed his eyes. Judge Fleischer looked at her for a long moment, then turned slightly toward the prosecution. "Continue." That simple word felt like a trap door opening, because the next witness was not on the original list. It was Vanessa's former assistant, pale and trembling, holding a printed stack of messages she had kept after being fired. Her voice shook as she read aloud texts sent by Vanessa hours after the crash. "Dad will handle it. Make sure the car is gone before noon. If that cleaning lady talks, bury her emotions until she folds." Elena lowered her head and wept without sound. Her daughter, seated in the second row, grabbed her mother's shoulder with both hands as if holding together something the world had tried to break. But the cruelest reveal came last. A letter from St. Vincent's billing office showed Elena had delayed surgery for nearly 3 weeks because she couldn't afford the deductible after missing work. 3 weeks in pain while the woman who hit her posted yacht photos from Capri with the caption, "Healing in Europe." The prosecutor didn't even need to say anything after that. The contrast was unbearable. One woman cleaned hospital floors at 4 a.m. to keep her daughter in school. The other treated human damage like an inconvenience between vacations. Vanessa was no longer arrogant now. She was fast-talking, flushed, unraveling. She blamed stress, paparazzi, bad friends, a broken childhood, pressure from her father, the noise of success. She cried without tears. She said she was being targeted. She said Elena was exaggerating. She said she never meant for any of this to happen. Judge Fleischer let her finish. Then she removed her glasses, laid them on the bench, and delivered the kind of monologue people would quote long after the clip hit the internet. Her voice was low, steady, and absolutely merciless. "Miss Sterling, this court has seen poverty weaponized against the innocent, power abused against the vulnerable, and truth suffocated under expensive language. But what stands out here is not merely that you injured a woman and fled, it is that you believed her life was smaller than your inconvenience. You believed money could edit morality. You believed influence could launder cowardice. And even now, after the footage, the records, the messages, the witness statements, after a mother sat 10 feet from you, carrying the pain you left in your wake, your first instinct is not remorse. It is entitlement. Let me be perfectly clear. Wealth may purchase privacy, comfort, and attorneys. It does not purchase innocence. In this courtroom, character enters before status, and yours arrived in handcuffs long before the bailiff ever touched you. No one moved. No one coughed. No one dared. Then came the one-liner that shattered what was left of Vanessa Sterling's illusion. "Privilege is not a defense," Judge Fleischer said, each word landing like stone. "It is often the evidence." Vanessa's face drained white. The sentence that followed was crushing. Maximum custodial time for felony hit and run causing bodily injury, enhanced for evidence tampering and witness intimidation. Restitution in full. Community service not at galas or charity cameras, but in trauma rehabilitation facilities under supervision. A permanent revocation of driving privileges pending extended review. Referral for further investigation into obstruction involving the Sterling family's staff and security systems. When the gavel came down, Vanessa made a small broken sound, the sound of a person hearing, for the first time in her life, that money had failed. Her father stood furious, but Judge Fleischer stopped him with a glance so cold it seemed to freeze the entire room. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling. You've bought enough damage for one family." And he sat. Later, the footage spread everywhere. People called it one of Judge Fleischer's most devastating rulings. Elena received the restitution she was owed, completed the surgery, and returned to work only long enough to train her replacement before accepting a hospital scholarship that paid for her certification as a patient care technician. Her daughter framed the first paycheck Elena earned in her new role. Donations flooded a legal aid fund in Elena's name. Other witnesses in unrelated cases came forward after seeing what happened in Courtroom 7, suddenly believing that truth might survive if spoken clearly enough. As for Vanessa Sterling, the woman who laughed at a judge and called suffering a lottery ticket, she was let out in silence, stripped of the one thing she thought she'd never lose, the certainty that consequence belonged to someone else. And if that ending hit you right in the chest, if you believe justice should be loud when cruelty has been comfortable for too long, then comment below with the moment that got you. Like this story, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who still needs the reminder that eventually, no matter how rich the lie is, the truth walks into court and stands up straight.